Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and vacuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Monday Election Eve. As I said on the podcast this morning, today is kind of like Christmas Eve. And you've got all the presents stacked around the tree, and you don't really know exactly what's in them. Some of them may be good. Some of them may be bad. Some of them you don't even want to open. And some of those gifts, you just kind of put them up on the top shelf of a closet somewhere and you kind of forget about them until, of course, you're cleaning out the closet and then you realize that, wow, I didn't know that somebody gave this to me. Perhaps I could regift it to somebody else, which is pretty much how I feel about all of the redcoats. We have an election. The results come in, and I'm sorely disappointed with some of the people that win, and I wish that I could put them on a shelf and forget about them, and they wouldn't harm anyone, and then later on, I can find them and gift them to some other place, not Wyoming. But unfortunately, elections don't work like that. Usually, the bad presents you get come election evening, you have to put up with for the next 2 years, and such will be the case tomorrow. We have a giant presidential election coming up. I don't think that anybody is unaware of that. But there are like historic things that are happening in our election. I've never seen a race like this before. I've never even heard of a race like this before. Now, I'm not saying that, we haven't had races that were kind of bitter. For example, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. John Adams accused Thomas Jefferson of wanting to fill the White House with French prostitutes. Thomas Jefferson, in turn, accused John Adams of being a hermaphrodite. So, the language really isn't any more vitriolic than it has been in the past. It's no more hostile. It's no more divided. You hear people all the time saying, this is the most divided our country has ever been since the Civil War. First of all, that's not true at all. We're not fighting a war. 500,000 people aren't dying. So that part isn't true. And the language, well, it's not really any more divisive than it has been in the past either. Now, perhaps it is more divisive than, say, the last couple of elections, but that's only on behalf of the Democrats. Now, we have to admit that Donald Trump deals as good as he gets. But you don't have all of the really inane insults that, like the ones that are coming from the left. That Trump is a dictator, he's a tyrant, he's a fascist. Now, by the way, Democrats have accused Republican candidates of being fascists for, I don't know, however many past elections. But certainly, Ronald Reagan was accused of being a fascist and a dictator and a tyrant and all that. And I'm sure there were Republican candidates before him that were accused of very similar things. So the rhetoric really on behalf of the Democrats really hasn't changed all that much. Now, what I haven't seen in an election is candidates where they had assassination attempts. Trump has had 2 of them, and depending on how you look at it, he's had 3 of them. Three assassination attempts on a presidential candidate. Absolutely shocking, my friends. And, there are other factors that are absolutely amazing too. You have the President of the United States, the current president, the current resident of the White House, saying stuff like this.
True international average of pressure.
Okay, all right, I'm going to miss that one. But he also said this.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Yeah, and then there was this one from this weekend.
But I'm serious. These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
Wow, right? Crazy rhetoric that is coming from the likes of the Democrat Party and Joe Biden. Now, Kamala Harris is not She's not immune to all of this stuff. The truth is that she's been saying some pretty crazy things for the past, I don't know how long she's been accusing President Trump of being a fascist and a racist, and I mean all manner of different things. So, I mean, the rhetoric on behalf of Kamala Harris and the Democrats really hasn't changed all that much. What's happened during the election? Yep, that's certainly changing. Now, I mentioned, and let me move on, switch gears here a little bit, because we're going to cover a lot of the presidential election during today's episode. But I want to talk to you about something I found out about over the weekend. And I don't normally do this because I like to be able to prove without a shadow of a doubt that what I'm telling you is the truth. But in some cases, you just can't do that. And so here is one of those stories. And let me just set it up for you. We had the primary election, and it was pretty clear. Oh, it is absolutely clear that conservatives have taken power in the House of Representatives. The Senate, on the other hand, is another story. We don't really have a clear picture how Senate leadership is going to turn out. But let me first explain how this stuff is determined. Now, after the primary, we took a number of seats in the legislature. By we, I mean conservatives. And before anything happened, it is a foregone conclusion that Chip Nyman is going to be the Speaker of the House. But none of that is official. You see, they don't have they don't officially decide that until after a caucus meeting. And from what I've been told, that caucus meeting is going to take place on November 20th. So what happens is the Republicans get together and they vote on who is going to be the president, and the Senate and the House, they meet separately. But they're going to vote on who is going to be the Senate president and the Speaker of the House. And they also vote on who is going to be the majority floor leader. Now, after the caucus vote, there's going to be a winner. The Republicans said, this is our nominee for House Speaker and Senate President. And then the presidency vote and the Speaker vote go to the floor. And everybody, even the Democrats, get to vote for that one. But it is an election just like the primary that we've went through and the general that we're going to go through tomorrow. The only difference being this one is held in secret. It's a secret ballot, and nobody is really going to know who voted where. Now, I mean, you can kind of guess what's going to happen. I mean, that's usually, who are the solid votes for the conservatives and who are the solid votes for the redcoats. So, I mean, you can kind of guess, but officially, nobody's going to know because it's a secret ballot. Not that long ago, there was an op-ed that was put out by Larry Hicks, Senator Larry Hicks, Senator Sherry Steinmetz, and Senator Brian Boner. And they put together a conservative leadership slate for the Wyoming State Senate. Larry Hicks would be the Senate president. Sherry Steinmetz would be the vice president, and Brian Boner would be the majority floor leader. Well, that's pretty much all that we've heard. Now, I think that there may have been an op-ed written in response to that one. But aside from that, I really haven't heard too much. And then this weekend happened. So here's the part where I give you a whole bunch of caveats because I don't have any solid proof to give you. All I can tell you is that 5 different independent sources have told Cowboy State Politics exactly the same thing. So what I'm going to present to you is not a fact, it's not set in stone, but it is information that I gathered from 5 different sources, and unfortunately I can't tell you who those sources are. So what I'm going to present to you in just a second is a theory, and it's no more than that. But it's a theory that happens to fit the facts and happens to fit what I perceive the political makeup of the Wyoming State Senate will be, at least as far as the leadership goes. There is another, I'll call them faction, another group of senators who have been negotiating with some of the redcoats in order to get leadership positions. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you exactly who those senators are. But the redcoat who is vying for the presidency is Tara Nethercott. That's right, Senator Slithers herself. So what is happening is there are a number of people that don't like the leadership slate that's been put together by Larry Hicks, Senator Sherry Steinmetz, and Senator Brian Boner. And so they've decided to play patty cake with the redcoats. In exchange for their vote for the Senate presidency, These senators will receive, or at least they're being told that they'll receive, committee chairmanships. So, in other words, you have a group of senators who are otherwise conservative, who have a pretty solid conservative voting record, playing patty cake with the redcoats so that they can have some sort of personal advantage. In other words, they're just being greedy. Instead of voting for conservative leadership in the Senate, they're willing to give all of that up just so that they can have a chairmanship. In other words, they're selling the conservative cause down the river for personal gain so that they can have power. Absolutely horrendous. And if you watch the Appropriations Committee that was held this past weekend, what you'll find is two of those senators, or at least one of them, really cozying up to Senator Slithers. Now, generally speaking, and you know the record of Cowboy state politics, I don't tell you something unless I have pretty solid proof that this is happening. So here is the information that I've been given, or that I was given 5 different times from 5 independent sources over the weekend, that Senator Bo Beitman and Senator Tim Salazar are negotiating with the liberals in the Senate so that Tara Nethercott can be installed as the Senate president, and that those two senators, Beitman and Salazar, will receive chairmanships or a seat in leadership. But here's the thing. You can't really trust Tara Nethercott. You can't trust any of the redcoats, really. They've proven that over and over. It was Tara Nethercott who helped short-circuit the conference committee over the budget. And then, magically, in the end, she was put on the second conference committee, and they got to spend money on whatever they wanted. It was also Tara Nethercott who was installed by Senator Ogden Driscoll as the appropriations chair in the Senate. Though Ogden Driscoll had no right to remove David Kinski at all from that role, that would have required a vote of the Senate, he did it anyway. So this is the person that we're talking about, Senator Slithers, Tara Nethercott. Now, why would anybody in their right mind trust that individual? Clearly, she is not a conservative. She has a terrible voting record. After the break, I'll bring you the statistics on Tara Nethercott's voting record. It's abysmal. And so why Beitman and Salazar are negotiating with her over chairmanships is beyond me. But here's what it's going to result in. Every piece of conservative legislation that comes out of the House of Representatives is going to be thwarted. Every single one of them, the Senate will put the brakes on it. Either Tara Nethercott will send it to a committee to die a painful and quick death, or B, she'll just put it in her drawer. And then the liberals in the legislature will be able to short-circuit everything that conservatives try to do. Basically, what you'll have is gridlock, which, there is an argument to be said for gridlock, where nothing happens in government. And generally speaking, I'm kind of in favor of that, where nothing happens, which is far better than what we saw in the last legislative session, where every liberal thing got passed. Well, except for the ones that the conservatives could stop on an introductory vote. But for years, for probably in excess of 20 years, the liberals have been in control of the legislature, and they've been able to pass just about anything that they wanted until now. Now, conservatives are in charge in the House, so the best that the liberals can hope for is to be able to I guess, bring to a standstill everything that the House of Representatives passes. And that's what's going to happen if Senator Tara Nethercott is able to get the Senate presidency. I don't really understand why Bo Beitman and Senator Tim Salazar are doing this. In fact, I find it kind of offensive because it kind of means that they're selling everything that all of us have worked so hard for in this last election down the river. I'll continue after the break. are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a selection of better news, entertainment, and commentary than right here on the Independence Network, with great voices like Joey Carenti from Just Blame Joey, Ken Pendergraft from The Ramble-Roon, Tom Kelly from Wide Right Turn, and the lovely Christine from The Hair Affair. And of course, my program, Cowboy State Politics, Wyoming's most listened to political program. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics on the Independence Network, on Facebook, on X, on YouTube. I'm almost omnipresent. It's a good thing, too, because I'm documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics. If you're just joining us, before the break, I was giving you a theory about what's happening in the Wyoming Senate and what I think is probably the plan. Now, before you say that, well, David didn't talk to any of these people, I did call Senator Bo Beitman, and I was unable to get a hold of him. I left a message on his phone, and he didn't call me back. So here we are doing the story without him, which, I guess if I were negotiating with Tara Nethercott, I probably wouldn't pick up a phone call from me either. But just to give you the long and the short of it is, these two senators, Tim Salazar and Bo Beitman, are allegedly negotiating with Tara Nethercott for for leadership positions in the Wyoming Senate. And the plan is to install and vote for Tara Nethercott to be the president of the Senate, and so that Bo Beitman either gets a leadership position, so either vice president or majority floor leader, or a chairmanship, and Tim Salazar gets the same. You see, the vote breakout in the Senate is a lot closer than it is in the House of Representatives. 2 votes either way can make a big difference. But I think the bottom line here is that you have 2 senators who have legitimately conservative voting records who are trading those out to deal with one of the redcoats, one of the chief redcoats in the House or in the Senate, for their own personal gain. And I find it absolutely shocking that those folks would trade their conservative credentials to get a seat in leadership. But I guess that's what politics is. Now, before the break, I told you I was going to look up Tara Nethercott's voting records, and I could tell you off the hip that they're not that great. In fact, according to WyoVote, Tara Nethercott ranks 23rd out of 31 as far as conservatism. 23rd out of 31. Now, by contrast, Senator Tim Salazar is number 9 on the list, and Senator Bo Beitman is number 7. So Tara Nethercott is the exact opposite of these 2 senators, or at least their voting records. So why they are negotiating with a straight-up redcoat, I have no idea whatsoever. But apparently they are. Now, according to Rhino, the results really aren't that much better. In fact, if you look at it, let's see here. Let's go down to Laramie County, and we'll find Tara Nethercott. Let's see here. Where does she end up? According to Rhino, she scores a whopping 30% as her adherence to the Wyoming Republican Party platform. So I guess the end of it is that Bo Biteman and Tim Salazar are negotiating with the Redcoat so that they have some sort of personal gain out of this. Obviously not conservative, obviously not ethical, and frankly, I find it absolutely abhorrent. Well, if you want to talk about this, I've opened up the phone lines. The phone number is 307-374-8989. That's 307-374-8989. The phone lines are open. Go ahead and give me a call, and we can talk about that, or we can talk about the election. So moving on from that, you know what? Every time I think about what's happening in the Wyoming Senate, it just turns my stomach, because we really have a chance to turn this state around. I mean, Wyoming voters gave the conservatives an absolute mandate, and I don't think that you can look at it any other way. Probably when this is all said and done, the conservatives will hold 40 seats in the House of Representatives. Now, again, the majority is not anywhere near that big in the Senate. But why would you short circuit all of the work that has been done in the previous election just so that you can get a chairmanship? It absolutely irritates the crap out of me. Oh, and by the way, Senator Biteman, if you want to talk about this, if you want to give me your side of the story, or Senator Tim Salazar, you go ahead and give me a call. You both have my phone number. Of course, you didn't return my last phone call, Senator Biteman. Oh, by the way, if you didn't know, Senator Biteman is my senator now. So congratulations, Senator. Here's a little bit more scrutiny for you. Now, over the weekend, there was a shocking bit of honesty from none other than Bill Maher. According to the Daily Caller, HBO host Bill Maher criticized media outlets for claiming that former President Donald Trump suggested putting former Representative Liz Cheney in front of a firing squad. Now, I don't know if you've heard about this or not, but during a discussion with Tucker Carlson, Trump was making the point that a lot of these people are war hawks, that they sit in their nice, tidy offices with their feet kicked up on the desk, and they send tens of thousands of U.S. troops to far-flung places to fight wars for reasons that don't exactly add up. And things would be, and Trump was making the point that they would probably make a much different decision if they were the ones fighting in the war, if they had 9 rifles pointed at their head. That's the point that Donald Trump was making. Well, the media flung that all around, twisted it all up, and said that Donald Trump was calling for Liz Cheney to be put in front of a firing squad. According to the Daily Caller, Trump accused Cheney of always seeking to go to war during a Thursday forum hosted by Daily Caller co-founder Tucker Carlson, suggesting she would pursue a less aggressive foreign policy if she had had guns, quote, trained on her at some point in her life. Maher said media outlets that claimed Trump wanted Cheney executed were not being truthful. Here is Bill Maher, and you can listen to this for yourself.
He says so many shitty things. Why do you have to do that?
And by the way, if Pete don't realize it, well, here's what he said. He's criticizing him for being a war hawk. Yeah. I mean, she is Dick Cheney's daughter. He said, she's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay. Let's see how she feels about it. They're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, we'll send tens of thousands of troops right into the mouth of the enemy. Now, of course, he expresses himself horribly. He has to add she's a stupid person because he's a moron.
Trump knows what it's really like from Vietnam.
Okay. But, just to be clear, this is exactly what hippies always said. This is exactly what peaceniks always said. This is Fortunate Son, the song. It's like, you know what? It's very easy to sit in your building and send young men to die. Mm-hmm. Apropos of Ukraine, yes. Because, I don't know, that war doesn't look like it's going in the right direction.
Not at all, no.
But just so, just don't lie to me. I don't like Donald Trump. Don't lie to me and tell me he wants in front of a firing squad. He was saying something that, by the way, if it came out of the mouth, some of it, not the stupid part, again, sounds like what hippies used to say about Bill, not sending people to...
exactly the point. And that's what Trump was getting at, is that things would be very, very different if you weren't able to sit in your cozy little warm office and send people off to far-flung places to die for their country. But there are a lot of war hawks in Congress. Liz Cheney is one of those. So it's shocking that it was Bill Maher that's the one that's calling them out. Which I don't. Bill Maher is a liberal. He's always been a liberal, but he's not one of the crazy ones. I guess a liberal is probably the wrong word to characterize him. A classic Democrat would probably be more fitting. He's in favor of bigger government programs. He's in favor of a lot of really LGBTQ stuff, but it's not all of that crazy stuff that men ought to be participating in women's sports and that men can have periods and all that. That's not Bill Maher. At least he is kind of level-headed again about it. But when you get called out by Bill Maher, you know that you're wrong in the media. Next up, Kamala Harris had a couple of really fascinating campaign rallies over the weekend. In one of them, she got super, super, super confused. And it wasn't that, and I guess the best way to describe this is a tale of two rallies from justthenews.com. With the election just days away, both former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are in the final stretch of their campaign tours. But the tones of each couldn't contrast more, with Trump on offense and on message, and Harris playing defense against the political far left of her own party. Though Harris initially attempted to portray her campaign as one of joy, Trump has taken on an almost jovial tone as polling and betting odds increasingly paint him as the favorite. His recent Madison Square rally, moreover, was an offensive play in the heart of Democratic territory and saw tens of thousands of people gather in the Big Apple at what he later deemed a love fest. Now, polling data shows a tight contest, with Trump holding a very, very, very small 0.3% lead in the Real Clear Politics average. That outlet currently projects Trump to win 287 electoral votes to Harris's 251. The Polymarket betting odds also favor Trump to win, with a 61% chance to Harris's 39% chance. So the betting odds, the polling odds, they're all in Trump's favor. But, it's in a lot of places, it's kind of a toss-up. The Trump campaign is optimistic, but campaign pollster Tony Fabrizio this week released a memo highlighting the difference in polling between this election and 2020. And the key point was this, that in every swing state, Trump is polling better than he did in 2020 by a sizable margin. So, if you're a betting man, you probably want to, or a betting woman, you probably want to bet on Donald Trump. But I think the proof is in how these candidates are handling the days before the election. Now, over the weekend, you would think it would be the final sprint towards the finish line. That's generally what you think in politics. You want to have a good, strong showing. But that is not what Vice President Kamala Harris has been doing. In fact, her rallies were interrupted by protests throughout the final week, with pro-Palestinian demonstrators often interrupting her remarks. Harris has struggled to respond to many of these situations, chastising them for interrupting her or acknowledging the importance of their concerns. Now, there was a piece and let's see here, she was in Reno, Nevada. Now, this one I want you to listen to carefully, because in this soundbite, yes, she's fumbling around. Yes, she has no idea what she's talking about, but she says something that's very, very telling, and it's an item that I have been explaining to you for months. So let's go ahead and listen to it, and then we'll talk about it.
To overturn Roe versus Wade. They did. And now 1 in 3 women in America lives in a state with a Trump abortion ban. Many with no exceptions for rape or incest. You know what? Let me say something about this. We're here because we're fighting for a democracy. Fighting for a democracy. And understand the difference here. Understand the difference here moving forward. here. What we are looking at is a difference in this election. Let's move forward and see where we are. Because on the issue, for example, of freedom of choice.
Okay. That's enough of that. But you could hear her getting really, really frustrated. And anytime that happens, she slips into the familiar word salad that we've all become so accustomed to. You know, the unburdened by what has been, or however she puts it. But she does slip into the word salad. And you can hear her right at the end just going into the let's move forward. But did you catch the real important part that she said? Let me rewind it, and I'll play it for you again, and then we'll talk about it.
Fighting for a democracy?
A little bit more.
Let me say something about this.
Okay, here we go.
We're here because we're fighting for a democracy. Fighting for a democracy.
Fighting for a democracy. We're here for a democracy. Now, there's no reference to the country. And she's clearly frustrated. So this could be just, her fumbling word salad, but I don't think so. Now, I've been telling you for weeks, perhaps months, that anytime you hear one of these Democrats say that we have to protect our democracy, they're a threat to our democracy, we're fighting for our democracy. Really, what they're saying is the democracy that they are trying to turn our country into. The democracy that they themselves are trying to create. Because, of course, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a representative constitutional republic. But, perhaps in a moment of frustration, Kamala Harris just admitted exactly what I've been telling you. We're fighting for a democracy. That is, to put the right people into office to fundamentally change the way our system works, to change it from one that is a republic to one that is a democracy. But in order to do that, Kamala Harris has to win the White House through the Electoral College. How many times have you heard Kamala Harris say that she would do away with the filibuster? Well, the filibuster is the 60-vote rule in the U.S. Senate, that you can stop a bill by continually talking, and in order to shut off debate, you have to have 60 votes. Now, Kamala Harris would do away with that. Why? Because a majority is a lot easier to get, and it would allow them to do anything that they want. Similarly, if we were to do away with the Electoral College and that everything, like every position, was elected by the popular vote, well, Democrats would be able to get elected a lot easier because your major metropolitan areas would be, they have more people in them. And so it would be those folks would be the ones that would be electing our leaders. That there would be no more republic. States would not have an equal say in the government, which is how it's set up now. That's the whole purpose behind the Electoral College. So that every state gets a say. That's the whole original purpose behind how senators were chosen, that each state gets 2 senators. Now, originally in the Constitution, it was the state legislators that selected senators. Now, we've since changed that, and now senators are elected by the popular vote. But this is the same thing that Kamala Harris wants to do to the rest of the American government. They're fighting for our democracy, the democracy that they want to set up. I'll have more after a brief but completely obnoxious profit timeout. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but it's hunting season. And one thing that you can be absolutely certain of is while you're tromping around in the boonies, at some point, it's going to snow. a lot. And you definitely want to make sure that you keep your feet nice and toasty warm. The best way that you can do that is to order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the warmest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Watch out! Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. The program is only going to continue to expand from every county in this state to every state in this nation. It's Cowboy state politics. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Wyoming's conservative voice. This morning on Glenn Beck's program, he had a piece written by a guy named John Coleman on his own Substack, and I think it's absolutely apropos that we talk about it, because tomorrow we're going to engage in yet another presidential election. And for 250 years, we have had, roughly 250 years, our presidential elections have facilitated the peaceful transition of power from one leader to another. And this is something that is, at the time it was started, unique to America. Every other country in the history of the world, power transitions have been bloody struggles. In some cases, wars have been fought, but not in America. George Washington, after 8 years of being the president, voluntarily stepped down. And, as King George had said at the time, that if he did that, he would be the most important, the most famous man in the world. And that's exactly what happened. But I just wanted to go through Coleman's piece because I think it's well written, and I think the day before the 2024 presidential election, it's worth talking about. And I quote, "Approximately 227 years ago, in 1797, George Washington, our first president, also became the first U.S. president to voluntarily cede the presidency to his successor. At the time, this was unheard of. For much of human history, power transitions were messy, violent affairs. The list of European wars of succession runs into the hundreds, with kings and emperors serving for life, only to have their heirs mire entire nations in bloody conflict. And at the time Washington submitted his resignation, Bavaria and the entirety of Austria had only recently emerged from similar wars. A contemporaneous revolution in France was engulfed in terror and turmoil. Africa and Asia were plagued with near constant conflict, and 5 of the 10 deadliest wars in history were Chinese civil wars, tens of millions of lives. America had been founded in part as a rebuke to all of that terror. The founders rejected monarchy, the idea that God had anointed a man or a family by birth to rule by violence over others. They instead embraced the radical idea that people are endowed by their Creator with inherent unassailable worth. That Creator has given them individual rights, and among them, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And government exists not to enforce the power of autocrats, but to guard the rights of individuals. For the first time in history, a major power was formed on the idea that government exists of, by, and for the people. Further, Those intended to lead that government were simply stewards of the entities erected to protect the people's sovereign rights. When representatives' terms pass, they are not to appoint their heirs or to cling violently to the wheel of state. They are to, like Washington's spiritual predecessor, Cincinnatus, lay down their swords and peacefully convey power to those who will then serve in their stead. At least 3 times, Washington had an opportunity to personally derail this project, and this is the part that's amazing to me. During the Revolution, he was granted nearly unlimited authority, akin to those of Roman dictators. Many suggested once victorious he should ascend as king, a suggestion he firmly dismissed. Several years later, his soldiers and officers proposed a similar ascent to power, only to be once again rejected. And finally, after the Congress that established our modern Constitution concluded in 1787, and the states subsequently ratified the document, Washington was the first and last man to take the presidency by unanimous consent in 1789. He set all the precedents of the office, including adopting humbler titles and dress than others suggested, and dramatically limiting his own powers. Then, after only 8 years, he voluntarily, and to the surprise of everyone, decided to retire, setting a precedent of 2-term presidencies that would endure until Franklin Roosevelt. King George III, upon hearing of Washington's plans to retire, repeatedly said, quote, "If he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world." He was. More than that, he became one of the greatest men in history, the founder of a nation, the general of an army that won an unwinnable war, unquestioned and universally admired civic leader, the one man in these United States who could have pulled the fledgling republic together, and the one man who, through his restraint and civility, cemented its grand traditions, allowed it to embark on history's most important experiment in self-governance, and empowered it to blossom into the world's most powerful country. So admired was Washington that his farewell address, apart from the Bible, was the most popular book in America between 1797 and the Civil War. Now think about that for just a second. That for over 60 years, the most popular book in the entire country was George Washington's farewell address. When he retired, it was unthinkable that a man of such power would relinquish it for the good of others. But he did, and in so doing set a precedent that America and her leaders were forever committed to the peaceful transition of office, limitations on the nation's executive, and acceptance of the democratic process. Moreover, that single example and the radical growth, innovation, and prosperity it unleashed revolutionized systems of government around the world. Today, U.S.-style representative government is more common than not. Peaceful transfer of power is more common than not. Billions now live empowered over, not crushed under, their leaders. And self-governed societies are typically richer, more beautiful, and more powerful than their autocratic enemies. That is a human triumph, and it's a spiritual one. It's also one for our nation's founding father deserves no small measure of praise. The United States is now approaching its 250th anniversary. We transformed the world. We've gradually worked to address the evils and imperfections that remained once the initial revolution was complete. We still remain, however, the richest, most powerful, most pluralistic, and freest nation in the world. We have been the city on the hill our leaders so longed for us to be. With the help of our democratic allies, we slay the fascist and communist monsters of the 20th century and created a Pax Americana that helped lift billions out of poverty and made the post-World War II era, apart from civil horrors of Stalin and Mao, history's most peaceful. And in our 248th year, we will once again transfer power from one executive and Congress to another. I pray with peace. But we all feel the republic is frayed. The constitutional limits laid out by the founders and guarded by our forebears have been stretched and strained by those who, as Lincoln once articulated, thirst and burn for distinction and will have it, whether at the expense of emancipating slaves or enslaving free men. Our citizens are now more diverse and divided than ever. Our most recent debate decade has been pockmarked by violence, riots, and turmoil, and our elections, so fundamental to the persistence of self-governance, are plagued by delays, disruptions, and widespread questions of legitimacy. Now, the article continues on, but I think that I'm going to leave it right there and allow you to go look it up. The title of it is, hold on just a second, the title of it is George Washington's Sacred Election Tradition. And it is one that bears further examination, I think, that we have always had a peaceful transition of power, no matter what the Democrats say. It has always been peaceful. And by that, I mean that wars have not been fought for one president to succeed the other one. It has always been peaceful. And regardless of what the Democrats say, Donald Trump peacefully allowed Joe Biden to come to power. There wasn't a war, and it wasn't, and January 6th was not Trump's riot, and it was not Trump's attempt to hold on to power. That time had already passed. His rally, he said, you are going to peacefully and patriotically walk over to the Capitol building. That is what the man said, and any insinuation otherwise is just a flat out lie. But tomorrow, my friends, we do have an election. And while I think that a lot of the irregularities that persisted during COVID have been sewn up, we cannot be too vigilant. There's an op-ed by Rod Miller in the Cowboy State Daily decrying any suggestion that our elections are not secure as mere nonsense. But I don't think that they are. There is a common refrain from Democrats that only 3 cases of election fraud have ever been prosecuted. Well, that doesn't mean that they don't happen. What that means is there's only been 3 that have been prosecuted. There are several of them that I've talked about on this show and that we've mentioned on the morning show that are just sitting on the desk of the Attorney General because she refuses to prosecute election-related crimes. So there are places where we need to pay attention to our election system. There are significant areas where we need to beef up security. But in the end, after tomorrow, and let's all pray that the election is clear by tomorrow night, we will all have a new president, or at least we'll have a president-elect. Well, one way or another, we're going to have a new president-elect, but let's just hope that it's Donald Trump. And, I mean, it looks like it's going to be, but let's just hope that happens. Let's hope that the Democrats don't continue their election denial, because make no mistake, in every election that a Republican has won, the Democrats have argued that the election was not legitimate. You can probably find at least 100 different sound bites of Democrats saying that Trump's first election was illegitimate. So for them to say that it is just the Republicans that denied the election is an outright falsehood. It's not true, and it never has been true. But try getting them to admit it. The truth is, the Democrats won't admit to denying the election, even though they have for a long time in the past. We'll finish up the program here in just a second. I've got a couple more articles for you, and then we'll tie it up before Election Day 2024. More after the break. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Cowboy State Politics is sponsored by FreedomGoldUSA.com. They are the working man's gold company. The economy is in turmoil. The stock market pretty much is out of control, and you never know what's going to happen with your finances or your income. One way that you can shore up everything is by investing in gold and silver. Go to freedomgoldusa.com/David for a free interview to discuss your options and find out if gold or silver is right for you. One more time, that's freedomgoldusa.com/David. Cowboy State Politics Live. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Before the break, we were talking about, obviously, we've been talking about the election for the entire hour, but there's been a number of polls that are out, and perhaps you've seen them. The one that the media is trumpeting all over the place is out of Iowa, and it shows that Kamala Harris has a lead in Iowa. But it's the only poll that's saying that. And usually when you're doing statistics and you have one outlier, you just kind of discount that one because it doesn't agree with the rest of them. Statistically, it is inconsistent with all your other results. And so that's what most of the pundits are saying that this Iowa poll is, that it's suspect at best. But the truth is that Trump is leading Harris in every single swing state, according to yet another poll. And I quote, former President Donald Trump is leading Vice President Kamala Harris in every swing state by a narrow but expanding margin. The surveys of likely Americans from Atlas Intel has revealed that the Republican nominee is favored to win North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania as the 2024 presidential election heads into its final days. 4 of those states are polling outside of the margin of error. Now that's important because every poll has what they call a margin of error. In other words, well, it could be 3 points this way or 3 points that way. In statistics, you always have, a certain area where, you might be in error. So it's the margin of statistical errors. Well, in 4 of those states, they're polling outside of it, which means there is a clear lead. In Arizona, Trump holds the widest margin with 52.3% to Harris's 45.8%. That's in Arizona. Now, remember how Arizona voted, allegedly, in 2020. Trump lost that state. In Nevada, Atlas Intel projects that the former president has a 51.2 to a 46% edge over the current Veep. That's in Nevada. In North Carolina, both candidates were campaigning there Saturday and over the weekend. Trump holds a 50.5% to a 47.1% lead. Georgia, the Republicans are leading 50.1 to 47.6. Several swing states are within the poll's two-point margin of error. In Michigan, 49.7 for Trump and 48.2 for Harris. Pennsylvania, 49.6 for Trump, 47.8 for Harris. And the closest contest is in Wisconsin, where Trump has 49.7% to Harris's 48.6%. Trump leads overall 49% to 47.2%, according to the poll. So, as I mentioned earlier in the program, the betting odds, the real clear politics average, they're all projecting that Trump is going to win this thing. Now, it's not over until the fat lady sings, of course, or the really annoying lady laughs, which I hope that she won't be laughing at all come tomorrow night. But, the way things are looking, Trump has got a distinct advantage. And take this into consideration, too, that in the 2016 election, the one that Trump won, all of the polls showed Hillary Clinton winning that election. That's why everybody was shocked on election night that Trump had pulled it off. So the polls were obviously wrong in that one. But in 2020, the polls were also incorrect. Now, they did show a closer margin than what evidently happened. And the truth is, Biden only won by 40,000 votes. 40,000 votes. That's it. That is smaller than the city of Casper, if everybody in Casper voted one way or another. So the polling, when it comes to Donald Trump, has historically been off, and it's been off in Trump's favor, by the way. So a lot of these polls, you could probably add that into the mix, not saying that it's an absolute, but it is a pretty clear indication of where we're at in this election. Now, you couple that with Kamala Harris not being able to tell voters anything, really. There is a long list of her flip-flops, and every time that she's asked a question, she kind of evades it. Not kind of, she does evade it. For example, over the weekend, she was asked what she thinks of a anti-crime measure that's being pushed in California. Here's the ridiculous comment that she said.
how did you vote on Prop 36?
So my ballot is on its way to California, and I'm going to trust the system that it will arrive there. And I am not going to talk about the vote on that because, honestly, it's the Sunday before the election, and I don't intend to create an endorsement one way or another around it. So.
Oh, well, the reason why she won't comment on it is she's not in favor of it. Because it's Kamala Harris who has been chiefly responsible for all the crime problems in California. As she is fond of saying, she was the chief prosecutor of California for a really long time. And so we can lay a lot of the problems in that state right at her feet. But I think the more important point here is that she dodges every single question that asks her to take a stand on anything. Either that, or she flip-flops in favor of what she thinks voters want to hear. When the truth is that the only thing voters want is for you to be honest with them. If you're honest with them, they can forgive a lot of stuff. And there are so many examples, so many stories I've heard from different legislators that a constituent has asked them their position on. And one of them that comes to mind was on the Convention of States. Their representative was being asked, "Hey, what do you think about the Convention of States?" And he knew that he was being, like, the people that he was talking to were very much in favor of it. And he said, "You know what? I totally disagree with everything about that. Here's why. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to vote the way you want me to on that one. I'm just not going to do it." Well, the truth is, that guy hasn't had an opponent for at least 2 cycles, and I don't know of anybody popular enough to beat him. And so, I think that voters really respect honesty because it is so rare in politics. More often than not, what you see in Wyoming politics is politicians telling constituents what they think they want to hear. That's why you get all these redcoats. They sit up on our doorstep or stand up on our doorstep and they tell us things like, we're conservative, we love our guns, taxes are too high, I'm a conservative, and you should vote for me. And so we do, because we're kind of a trusting bunch here in Wyoming. And then they go down to Cheyenne and they do exactly the opposite. They pretend that they're a Republican when they're back home, and when they go to Cheyenne, not so much. But I think that is one of the chief reasons why the House of Representatives flipped in such a major way. And I think it's what we're going to see in future elections in 2 years is a larger conservative takeover, simply because Wyoming citizens are sick to death of being told one thing, and when they come to find out their taxes are raised, there's more spending, there's more restrictions on their way of life, and it's just a result of lying politicians. So, but we burned up pretty much another busy broadcast hour on the program this election eve. If you haven't voted already, please make plans to go vote. This is the one time that you actually get a say in your government. You get a say in who is going to be making the decisions for the next 2 and 4 years, 2 and 4 and 6 years. And so make sure that you take advantage of that. It's your civic duty. It's one of the few, it's a right that many people across the world don't have. So please make plans to go vote. As I told you, me and the lovely Christine are going to go vote early tomorrow morning, in between the morning show and the live program. But for now, on this election eve, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.